campus, our fictional campus, and collaboration and teamwork. And then for the next slide, I'll introduce this topic of holistic admission. So you'll hear this word a lot as you go through the application process, but specifically for us, it really means that we're weighing all of these factors and they all have something to do with our decision. So you can see this graphic here. Really, all three of those areas are things that we're considering in our final decision. We'll go through each of them kind of as we go. And so your ideas might change as you start to weigh all of these factors together. But this very much mirrors what we're doing on our campuses each year with our applicant pools. So I think we are ready to head to the next slide. I can just go in and start talking about our first candidate here. So that would be Yixuan. And so Yixuan is a Chinese citizen living in China for his whole life. His native tongue is Chinese. Both of his parents have bachelor's degrees, and currently in his senior year attending a national curriculum school in Beijing, China.
Amazing. Each of us is gonna sort of focus on one single student so you can re remember our voices tied to the student. I'm going to be talking about our friend Anne. She's a Canadian citizen living in a small rural location in Canada most of her life. However, right now she's in her senior year at a boarding school in India. She transferred there in 11th grade from a public school that she was in Canada. Both parents have high school diplomas, but neither of them went to college, making her a first generation to college student.
Great. And I am really excited to tell you a bit more about David. You'll see here David was born in Chicago in the United States and moved to Singapore at the age of 3, where he's lived since. Both of his parents graduated with a bachelor's degree, and his mom has an advanced degree, has an MBA. And currently, he's in his senior year at an international school in Singapore. We're going to go to the next slide because you're probably looking for some more information, right? And so now, as Jackie mentioned, right, we're talking a little bit about the academic component. Then you'll hear a little bit about who students are outside the classroom. And then the last slide that you'll get to see from these students is about that sort of like institutional fit, institutional priorities. So yeah, I'll turn things back to Jackie to tell you a little bit more about the academic experience.
Sure, yeah. So for Ishwa, her academic experience is based in that national curriculum, but she has been able, or sorry, he has been able to take some AP classes along with the national curriculum. And those AP classes are AP Physics, Economics, Calculus, French language, English language, and literature. Next up, for grades, so we're looking in ninth grade, it was a mix of mostly B's and some A's. In 10th and 11th grade, he had a mix of A's and A pluses. So we're seeing a bit of an upward trend there, but there is still, there are some B's in French. So that might be a slight point of weakness for him there. But overall GPA is a 4.05. So we're looking at a pretty strong student overall. And Yishuan decided not to take the essay or not to submit SAT or ACT scores. So that's not something we're going to be thinking about in the process for Yishuan. And I will turn it over to Joe to speak about Anne.
Thank you, Jackie. So as for Anne, we have again a transition in curriculum in school since she transferred to her residential boarding school in India in 11th grade. In the IB curriculum, she's currently in the IB curriculum, but she did her first 2 years of high school in a Canadian curriculum. You can see the IB courses that she's taken there. If you don't know the IB, you take 3 courses in the high level, 3 courses in the standard level across 2 years. So these are going to be repeated courses for the 2 year span. And the grading is on a 7 point scale, six and sevens being more like A's, five being a B, four a C, three a D, and so on, roughly speaking. So you can see here for Anne's grades, she had all A's in ninth and 10th grade, but she had a pretty significant dip in 11th grade when she transferred to this boarding school. She got a 3 or a D in French, a 4 in history, a 5 in marine biology, and the rest have been sixes and sevens. She is predicted. The IB diploma allows us to get a predicted score, what the school expects the student to get in their final exams. We get a predicted grade of 36 out of 45, which is okay, but it could be stronger for sure. As for testing, though, we have an SAT of 1520 that she submitted, which is a strong testing for her. So 770 in math, 750 in English.
Okay, great. I'm excited to share a little bit more about David's academic trajectory. You'll see here he's in an advanced placement curriculum, also known as APs, and he will complete 11 AP courses by the time he graduates, with over half of them being in 12th grade. That is a really rigorous and demanding course load, no doubt. We see that his grades, there's a high school grading scale of A's and B's. So he's had a mix of A's and B's in ninth through 11th. But we'll see that there's a slight upward trajectory. In 12th grade, we have first semester grades. And in those 6 advanced placement courses, he's got 4 A's and 2 B's. So that's really exciting to see that in his most rigorous curriculum yet, likely, he's doing his best work. We also see that David chose not to submit the SAT or ACT, but did choose to self-report from those 5 AP courses he took before 12th grade, a mix of 4s and 5s on those AP exams. So up to us in the admission committee to determine whether or not that's something that we think is helpful. All right, so now you've gotten sort of a first look at these 3 students. And I know you're hungry for more information, but just to get sort of a temperature check, it'd be really great to know who you are most compelled by with the academic and some of the personal information that we have. So please select one of these students that you would like to vote to admit. And it'd be awesome in the chat to hear a little bit about who you're most compelled by and why. And again, if questions are coming up for you, please put them in the Q&A and we'll be excited to get to them in a little bit. I always feel like this is a great drum roll moment. I know it can be challenging to make a decision, but at this moment, I promise you'll get more information, just helpful for us to know who is resonating most strongly with you now.
Yeah, right now we have 40% of you have participated. So we would love to see a little bit higher participation so we can kind of get a good representation.
Let's get to that 50%. Juniors, I'm looking at you. This is a great way to step into this process.
Somebody said, so hard to make a choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I understand that for sure.
We're wanting you to get a taste of what it's like for these poor admissions officers who have to read so many applications of many, many strong students. Okay, maybe we'll give it like 10 more seconds. If you don't see the poll, you gotta look on your Zoom. There might be like a little notification. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. We have 40% wanting Yixuan and 26% saying Anne and 34% saying David.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Gloria. What a great spread. There's advocacy across these 3 candidates. All right. Well, I know you want to learn more, so let's talk a little bit more about how students are engaging in their communities.
You're getting a sense of how tough this is. Okay, it's only going to get more difficult from here. Okay, so Yixuan is a 4-year tennis athlete and captain of the tennis team. So some nice leadership there and some consistency. Can really see the passion for tennis. But he's also a member of the cooking club, has had multiple finance internships, and takes care of his younger siblings. So a very well-rounded resume there. Next up, for Yixuan's essay, he writes about his love of beverages and his journey experimenting with his own concoctions. We learn that he's persistent and enjoys applying his knowledge to practice. And then finally, from his recommendation letters, so typically we see some teacher recommendations and a counselor recommendation. We see that he's in the top 1% of his class. His counselor describes him as caring and candid. He goes the extra mile to learn and is highly engaged in community projects. Next up, we'll talk about Anne.
Yeah, so for Anne, her biggest participation is in the karate, being a karate competitor, and she's actually part of the national team, and also an assistant coach. She's also part of competitive theater improv, something that I didn't know existed until I read her application, but fun to see. She works part-time as a dance instructor, and she's doing research in marine biology, both in advocacy and policy work, and she's part of some clubs in high school. Her essay is a deeper dive into what she's learned from karate, seeing it not only as a sport, but as a lifestyle and understanding all about dedication, failure, teamwork, and leadership through the sport. Her recommendations give us a lot of context, and they're really upfront about how she really initially struggled with a transition to the IB diploma in 11th grade, a much more challenging curriculum than her previous public high school curriculum in Canada. So that's why she had this significant dip. But she's used her summer to catch up and is trying to be better. And while she doesn't have a leadership title in sort of anything that she participates in, she's very much a role model in the residential setting, and that's how she sort of demonstrates that leadership.
Okay, excellent. I'm excited to tell you a bit more about David, who I think really encapsulate this idea of both breadth of community engagement, but also you'll see some real depth. So David founded a fundraiser and a nonprofit for underprivileged preschoolers and their fees. He's also teaching English. He is a regional board member for the Global Youth Nonprofit Organization, chair of MUN. Who doesn't love MUN? He's also had experience as a research assistant at a university looking at computer science and AI, and done some data analysis internships as well. Busy guy. He writes about supporting a younger peer through a challenging social situation. And we get to see a little bit more about sort of who he is and what he values. He's excited to be a mentor and wants to really support his younger peers, which in a lot of ways really connects nicely to the kind of residential community we're seeking to build at McColbat. In his recommendation letters, we hear a lot of those same themes come through. There's this clear passion for computer science, for AI and machine learning. Um, and he's thinking a lot about sort of policy implications within these really important sort of ideas and topics to all of us. And we also see, just like we got to hear from him directly about how important it is to be a mentor, that's also something that his letters of recommendation really lifted up. And it's wonderful to see that sort of consistency in how a student presents themselves and also, the adults in his life are really supporting that. So I, for one, am very excited about David. And now you choose who you are most excited about, who you really see, again, not who you like the most or who you see yourself in, but thinking about McColbat and who we are and what we value as an institution, who you think is going to thrive on our campus, how will they contribute meaningfully to the building of our community, and how will the opportunities and resources we have available allow one of these students to grow in really exciting ways. And I think, as Jackie mentioned, probably the decision is just getting harder. So I'm sorry. I hope you have a calming cup of tea with you. That's certainly important for me as I'm reading applications.
Um, people started voting faster this time. I don't
All
know if it's
right.
because the poll, they knew where the poll was now, or now they're like, okay, now we're in the groove. So,
Excellent.
but I'm gonna give it a little bit more time because we want to get to like close to the number that voted last time. So if you
Oh,
voted
definitely.
last time, you definitely want to vote this time too. See
And
if
feel
anything
free to
changed.
share why you're voting
Yeah.
for who you're
Type in the
voting
chat and
for.
let us know, you know, it, even kind of how you're struggling with it.
Mhm.
All righty, we're almost at the number. Come on, I just need three more people. Three more people to tell me what you want. All right, guys. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, 51% want David this time. 23% for Anne and 26 for Yushin. So,
Woo. All
woo,
right.
some shifting.
Exactly. Okay. And now, sort of, we'll t hear a little bit more about that last piece of the holistic puzzle that Jackie was talking about, sort of institutional match. So I'll turn things back to Jackie.
Yeah, okay. So for Ishwan, the first thing we're thinking about is demonstrated interest. And really that means that it's how you're interacting with the college you're applying to. And so Ishwan has attended 3 virtual events for McColbat and submitted an initial view interview that really made him kind of jump off the page. And we kind of understood him as a real person and understood his interests in a real way, and in his own voice. And then for a supplemental response, so this is something that was specific again to McColbat. So Ishwan's Y McColbat supplement is somewhat broad and lacked depth, pretty generic, authentic voice. So maybe a little bit more research could have been done, but we got a sense of who he was. Next up, mission alignment. So again, bringing it back to the mission of the college, how is Ishwan fitting into that? So he really shows a clear dedication to finance with extensive internship experience. So that speaks to kind of what we're looking for in some of our programs. And he can contribute to the tennis team. That's always nice to see. And next up, we'll talk about Anne.
Amazing. So I actually met Anne on the road when I went to her high school, and boy oh boy was she a lovely human being. Just the darndest, goodest human being. She did not submit an initial view interview or any interview whatsoever, so we didn't get to see her sort of like come alive in the application process, but we did get that interaction at her school. Her supplemental response. There was a couple of typos, I will admit. The biggest of which was that she wrote Mabolcat instead of McColbat, so she kind of misspelled the institution. But that aside, she had a very genuine reflection on her interests in who we are, and she actually noted specific programs and opportunities that would actually make her thrive and which she would be excited by to take a part of here in McColbat. As for who we see her and how she aligns to our mission, we see this very clear interest in pursuing interdisciplinary sciences and also partaking in the politics summer research program that is happening at Washington. And overall, through her application, we just saw this beautiful eagerness to becoming a marauder and being sort of an intentional member of our community.
Okay, great. As for David, David connected with McColbat via a virtual alumni interview, and we got a sort of report from the alum, which really sort of aligned with other pieces of the application that we received already. Um, his supplement, he talks openly about using AI, and then sort of challenges us as the reader to sort of think about how we feel about his use of AI. So it was an interesting take, though didn't really answer the why McColbat question. So we get a better sense of his intellectual curiosity, perhaps, but not maybe a better sense of why he's chosen to apply. Um, and then in terms of mission alignment, we're seeing this, really strong interest in computer science. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, that strong interest in community building and being a mentor. And we see that aligning really nicely with with the residential community we're building at McColbat. I also have the opportunity. I wear 2 hats in the McColbat office. I'm not just an admission officer, but I also serve as the athletics liaison. And
Ring,
I'm
ring, ring,
I'm
ring,
so sorry to be rude here, but I must take a call from
ring,
our
ring,
tennis
ring, ring.
coach. And I've been told that this is not a phone, but instead this is a phone. So let me answer my phone. Oh, oh. So it seems Nick, our tennis coach, our men's tennis coach, is saying that Yuxuan came to him a little bit late in the process, but is someone who they see contributing to the tennis team. Maybe not in their first year, but in years 2, 3, and 4, they'd be a really important player for the men's tennis team, which we know just got those new courts and is part of some of our other sort of strategic planning in the athletics realm. So, friends, admissions counselors, do with that what you will. So now we have the sort of impossible choice where you're going to choose one of these really delightful students to admit, the student that you think most closely aligns with the McColbat mission. You're going to choose one of these students to waitlist. I will say one of the things that's helpful to think about in the waitlist conversation is who do you think on May 12th or June 12th or sometimes July 12th would be interested in saying yes to McColbat if they too received a call, not from Nick, but from one of us about the possibility of joining the class. So that is definitely a key component. A waitlisted student is someone that we are compelled by, but we just don't have the place in the class for them at the moment. So that is something to consider in the waitlist decision. And then, unfortunately, at highly selective institutions, we deny the vast majority of applicants. And that doesn't mean that they weren't incredible in their application, but just the reality of not having as many places in the class as we would like. So I'm going to ask you to take another minute or so, make those selections. If you are interested in sharing a little bit about why you're voting for who you're voting for in the chat, that's awesome. And we'll look forward to the final results.
Okay, don't be shy. You guys can discuss on the chat.
Please. Yeah.
Let's see if I have any on the other platform saying anything. um, and right now it looks really tight, guys, but
Every vote counts.
every vote counts. So I really, really want, like, if you didn't vote the last 2 times, now is your chance. We definitely
Exercise
want.
that right.
Uh, and while we're waiting for people to vote, if um, Jackie, Kat, and Joe, can you describe for us a little bit of what it is like in the committee room? Like when you are making a decision, is it like a vote? Like are people raising their hand, or how does it work?
Oh, Gloria, it depends.
I know.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more. I think there are a lot of ways in which this exercise is like our process, right? We are really compelled by these students. I hope you can see the sort of like joy we have in presenting students to our admission committee. We recognize incredible strengths within all of our applicants, and it's really our job to lift those up and to think about, again, who a student will be when they get to our campus community. The ways in which, and there are numerous ways in which this is not like our admission committee, right? We never have 3 students and 1 place in the class. We make individual decisions about each applicant based on what we think is best for our institution and what we think is best for that student. And then we move on, right? And so for me at Haverford, not at McColbat, in order to be admitted, you would go through a consensus-based admission committee discussion. So there's no vote. It's really sort of a sense of the room or a sense of the meeting. And that's how decisions unfold. But would love to hear a little bit more about Bates and Vassar.
Yeah, Bates does not follow consensus-based decision making, though that sounds incredibly lovely. We follow a committee-based evaluation process where in committee with a larger group of the staff, maybe 6 people, maybe 12 people, a majority vote will be placed. But that's not a final vote, and by all means, applications are seen again and again throughout the multiple weeks of decision making.
Sure. At Vassar, we do an individual review first, and then it goes to either a second read or it goes to committee, or sometimes both of those things. And we really try to make sure there are many eyes on an applicant. But we all have our personal attachments to people. My job is to be an advocate for the students that I review. And so when I bring them to committee, I'm really trying to give an unbiased assessment. But at the same time, we're humans. This is a very human process, but you're also human. So we're trying to match that energy as much as possible. We all come in with our own biases. And I think that's why we have multiple voices in the room, is to make sure we're checking each other. For example, I was a theater kid in high school. I never played sports. It's a little bit harder sometimes for me to connect to that. But that's why I have a team that, is made up of a bunch of different people with different viewpoints, so that they can make sure that I'm not bringing every theater kid to Vassar, but, making sure that we have a well-balanced class. But, the conversations are really important that we have in these committees. It's making sure that we're keeping close to the mission, and that we are bringing in an interesting and diverse community to our campus each year.
Awesome. Well, the verdict is in, and um, the majority have decided that Ishan is admitted. Um, and then the majority waitlist choice is Anne, and the majority choice for the deny is David. Oh. And we were seeing some comments in the chat, definitely there were a few things that I think resonated with people about, the supplemental essay being not about the question maybe, and definitely some AI questions maybe. Do you all have comments on any of those things?
Sure. Yeah. I think one thing I'm glad that you're resonating with the value of the supplements, right? Because I would put it this way, if any college or university has a supplemental question, I promise they've spent an enormous amount of time thinking about it. There are an infinite number of questions that could be asked, and the college or university has asked you one or two, or I think Stanford has like 10, but right, they've asked you purposefully what for you to answer that question. And it's really, really helpful to have your voice come through in those responses. We think a lot about who we're building, the kind of community we're building on our campuses, and oftentimes the supplemental responses can, and in my committee conversations, can really move the needle. When we're having a hard time reaching consensus, we'll read through your supplements aloud. I'll do my best to advocate for you. There is no better advocate for you than you, right? So see the supplements. You're putting in an enormous amount of time and energy and effort to this process. See the supplements as a way for you to show your work. And I'll tell you, this past year, the supplemental responses that we received, there it became really clear the students who leaned on AI and lost their voice in the process. Because we're not just reading your application each day, we're reading a few dozen applications a day, perhaps. And what is an authentic reflection versus what is a AI generated reflection becomes clear. And it's just a bummer to not have the opportunity to hear from you and to give you the space to advocate for yourself. So I'm sure my colleagues have things to add, but just really want to lift up that idea of authenticity. Not that you can't use AI, but make sure that your voice is very much still coming through. That if someone read it, they would know that you wrote it.
I'll just add, about that authenticity and your voice. There's a lot of places in the application where you can add that, but thinking about the stuff you can't necessarily control, that's your transcript. The work has been done, and you can't necessarily read your teacher recommendations or your counselor recommendations, so you don't always have control of that. The things you have control over are those written responses, both the main essay and that supplement, an initial view interview, or how you're interacting with the college. Those are all very important, and again, can add to that authenticity and really show your voice in the application process. And once again, this is a very human process. We're humans reviewing your application, but also we want you to be kind of your full self on our campus. And we're trying to make sure that our community has, a really interesting vibe to it. And so, when we can really hear who you are and see who you are, again, those are the things you can really control in the application. Make sure you're really telling us in an authentic way who you are and who you'll be here on our campus.
Great. Well, any other thoughts, admissions officers, about kind of this exercise? And for everybody watching, do you have questions? Like what are your final questions? I'm going to stop sharing so people can see all our faces in this discussion.
I think something that has also been highlighted through the comments is that the tennis coach and the call may have sealed the deal, and that I think it's important to just highlight how like many factors go into an admission decision. It's not just going to be academics. It's definitely not just the SAT score. It's not just where you go to high school. It's not just who you are and what you bring to the community. It's everything that we discussed and then some, right? And some decisions and some factors are way beyond your control, and rely on what the institution is looking for at the time and what we're trying to build in our community. Imagine if McColbat didn't have a tennis team, right? That piece of the conversation would have just been completely erased, right? And Yishan wouldn't have been that person who is highlighted through maybe his specific impact in a tennis team, right? So what would have the decision been at the time, right? So there's a lot of things that go into play, and I just want to recognize that there's things that you have in your control that you can build a strong application for, and there's also things that just are a matter of what the institution is looking for, what the admission committee is focused on, and seeing you not only as an individual who can contribute wonders in our communities, but also seeing you as part of our mosaic that we're trying to build with the 500, 800, 1,000 other people that we're trying to bring each year.
I would
Um,
also just add, like, the word fit comes up a lot in the admission process. And I think that's important. You want to make sure when you're building your list of colleges to apply to that these are places that might be a good fit for you. But, fit means a lot of different things. Sometimes it's, do you speak to the mission of the college? Are you someone who wants to be a community builder like at McColbat? Are you a good fit for the academic programs there? So make sure that when you're applying to colleges that you kind of think about that in the process and if you fit. But at the same time, I think all of us are trying to make sure that our communities don't become stagnant either. We want people who, in some ways, fit the college, but also some cases like don't quite fit, and maybe we'll challenge our communities as well. So, make sure that that doesn't dictate everything, and that you're really thinking about a place that feels like home to you for the next few years and feels like the people around you will be your friends and your colleagues.
That's a really great thing to be bringing up, Jackie, because next week we're having a specific Tuesday talk about fit. And how to kind of research schools to be able to see what that means for you as a student. So definitely tune in then. Um, we have some comments and questions about yields and what that means in the decision making process. Like, how much does that weigh into kind of your conversations? Is that like a conversation that happens earlier on in the read, or is it something later? Any comments about, determining, trying to guess if a student is going to come or not and how that plays in?
I'll answer very quickly, at least for a place like Vassar. We do not take demonstrated interest into account. So that's not necessarily a major factor. Whether somebody attended a college fair or program, it's nice to see, but it's not going to affect our decision. But somewhere along the line, maybe in waitlist, that's where it might play a factor. So I'll let my colleagues answer if maybe they have a different experience at their institution.
I'm happy to jump in terms of the Haverford approach. I think the first thing to say is we take it seriously if you've chosen to apply to Haverford or any of our colleges, right? We hope you're not applying to more than 10 or 12 college and universities. We hope and know that was an intentional choice. So the application is a strong demonstration of interest, and I want to be clear about that. But the sort of we think about demonstrated interest, I would say, in a qualitative way. So there's not a formula for us. It's really thinking with your supplement about how you've engaged with us, how you've thought about and articulated why of the, 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States, let alone the thousands of colleges across the globe. Haverford is one of the places you've chosen to apply. And then, an interview, whether it's via initial view, whether it's via our alumni or other outlets, that can also be a really helpful way of demonstrating interest. You're engaging with another person, you're sharing a bit more about who you are and what you value. And we've talked a lot about authenticity, right? And that's the interview can be another place for that authenticity, which often then aligns with this idea of demonstrating understanding, demonstrating interest in our college or university. So it is a factor, but not in the way I think most people think it is. Like Jackie said, we're not sort of checking boxes for your engagement. It's really about your ability to tell us, I've done my research, I see myself here, and this is why. And that's really, really a fun part of our process for sure.
Awesome. Okay, and we have some questions about testing, test optional. So if, we noticed David didn't submit an SAT or SAT, but did submit AP score. So, what level of score would you recommend? Like, I mean, we didn't talk about that too much in committee about how that score could have been talked about. So maybe any thoughts on whether or not AP exams should be reported, when they should be reported? Does it play into the conversation?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and not to steal Kat's very much trademark phrase, but it depends on the institution, and how we
Every Tuesday
approach.
talk, always. The answer is it depends.
Sounds like a t-shirt, Gloria.
I know.
But I think it depends, right? It depends on the institution and how much they value those scores. I know of institutions that require applicants, if they've taken an AP test, to submit those scores, and they are part of the review process. For Bates, we welcome the AP test scores, but they're not going to be sort of influencing the academic profile as much as what your actual grades in those classes were. Because the reality is that we use the AP test scores mostly to at the after the admission process as part of the transfer credit policy that we're allowed to have at Bates. Students can bring up to 4 credits of college level classes that they took in high school, including AP scores or AP tests, AP classes into their Bates curriculum, right? What I say about testing in general is that it is an important data point, and any data point in our review process is going to be important, but it's not the only data point that's important, right? And we value so much more 3.5 years of a high school experience than 3.5 hours on a Saturday morning. And that goes for AP tests as well as SAT and ACT tests. SATs and ACTs, we've been able to see how they can be useful in many cases, but they're not indicative of student success. Bates did a study a few years ago where they split the class into 2 groups, one who applied with testing and one who applied without testing, and we sort of recorded their GPAs across all 4 years at Bates. And after their 4 years at Bates, we saw the difference in their collective GPAs was just of 0.01%, zero 0.01 in their 2 GPAs. So telling you that it's completely insignificant, and it doesn't tell us whether a student will be more or less successful in college. I'll also note, as we're seeing more and more colleges are going back to test required, and that tells you a lot about how an institution views their application process and what they really value. So just food for thought as you're sort of making the decisions on where to apply and how to submit your application. You should rest assured that at the very least, the 3 colleges that are here and those who say that are test optional, we rely on a true test optional policy, right? If you do not submit testing, as Jackie said earlier, we do not penalize you in any way. It's not going to be a question as to why you didn't submit testing. If you do submit testing, that's when we consider the score for better and for worse. And that's for Bates specific. I know other colleges do just if it helped your application, just like that, right? But it's a true test optional policy.
And I would just add, test optional often refers to the SAT and ACT, and there's typically a separate policy listed on a college's website for English proficiency scores. So make sure that you're also looking up that policy, because just saying, oh, I'm going to be test optional and not send my SAT, you may still have to send English proficiency scores or not, but make sure you're checking that policy as well, because that will be a little bit different.
And the last thing to say on this question, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound like I'm on a soapbox, but I am. If you are not in an AP curriculum, if you are not taking that AP class, please do not take the AP test. There are so many better ways for you to spend your time, and I'm including sleeping in that, right? So we are not expecting students who are in different curriculum to be taking tests that don't align with the curriculum that's offered at their high school. And I hope that's something that you're hearing again and again, but I just wanted to be really clear about that.
And if you're taking AP exams this week, good luck. Jayo. I didn't say it right, but that's good enough.
No, you said it right. Good job. Good job. Okay, well, we only have a couple more minutes. So there's a couple more questions. And so I just want to share the contact slide so that if you have a specific question for a specific college, please reach out. That's why we have these. And we will talk about some of these questions that didn't cover next week as well. But I do want to ask you all to give you just a chance, because there is a question of like, how is a compelling applicant changing at your institutions over the years? So if you could just share a little bit about how you see that at your institution as kind of a closing thought and an encouraging word, that would be awesome. And I'm mindful of the time, so you guys, you know what I mean.
How we see, sorry, can you repeat the question? I was
Yeah.
encouraging Justin in his AP test. So.
How have you seen a compelling applicant change over the years for you, specifically for your institution? Like, what do you see as compelling?
That's a good question. I think so. In the age of AI and in the age of just a lot of things that are able to be fabricated or deeply edited, authenticity for me is key. Seeing a student be a 17-year-old, be themselves, have their voice shown in their application as their own is so impactful and so deeply appreciative. So more and more, I'm seeing myself lean into that authenticity and being able to sort of like verify that a student is who they are and a student is sort of that 17-year-old, 18-year-old applying to college.
I would kind of add the same thing. I've been doing this. I was trying to do the math, I think almost 15 years at this point. And, there's in some ways less data points over the last few years. I'm not seeing testing as often. I'm not seeing rank as often in many schools. And that's all fine. And so I think the things, again, that the students can control have become even more important. I would also say over the last probably 3 or 4 years, that connection to the mission of a college has become more important as well. Again, sometimes it goes back to data points, whereas in the US, we're seeing less data points for a student's demographic information. And so we're thinking about how they align with our mission in a very deep way. And that's really when we do training for our application readers, that's a really big part of what we train for. And so, again, I think a student's fit in our community, I think a student's voice have become even more important in the last few years.
Awesome. I couldn't say it better than either of my colleagues, so maybe I'll leave you with this thought, and especially for the students, but for the counselors and parents and guardians, the admission decision a student receives, whether it's the one that they wanted or not, is in no way, shape, or form a reflection of your worth or value as a person. It's just not. These were three fantastic students. We cared about them. We saw them as wonderful additions to our community, and they got different decisions, right? So I hope students, you're finding joy in this process of discovering who you are and what you seek in your next college or university or in your next institution, and that you're also growing in confidence that whatever college or university you choose to join will be all the better for your presence, because it absolutely will be, right? And so I hope that's something you're able to hold on to, share with your friends, and lift one another up through this process too.
Yay, thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you again for joining and taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you everyone else for tuning in. We'll